Hi, welcome to Elizabeth Reads. I have one of Usborne's books from the Chelsea Walk series here. It's called Girls with a Voice. This is Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Chapter 2, Nymphs and Shepherds. The dining room was full of voices, movement, rustling skirts. Marianne felt eyes on her, the eyes of the teachers who had taken their places at the ends of each table and those of passing girls. She felt nervous and was glad of Sophie's presence. "Stand here," said Sophia, "next to me." They were at the lower table, near the door and the kitchen entrance. A teacher stood at the end, and opposite Marianne and Sophia were two girls who Sophia introduced in a whisper, "Lucy and Phoebe." Both girls smiled. Phoebe was pretty, fair, and small. Lucy, a taller, quiet-looking girl, had a shy manner. A hush fell on the room, and Mrs. Neve at the far end spoke a grace. Marianne joined in the murmured "Amen," and there was a scraping of chairs as they all sat down, and the servants moved into the room carrying dishes. Marianne scarcely noticed the food, except to watch that she did not eat too fast for good manners, or too slowly, or reach for things across the table. Several dishes passed by her because she was too shy to ask for them. The teacher at the end called back a dish of carp and told Marianne, "Try this, it's good." Sophia turned to the teacher. "Mrs. Corelli, Marianne is to have singing lessons with you. She is quite in love with music and wishes to become an opera singer." Marianne blushed and looked at her plate. She hadn't expected her confidence to Sophia to be passed on so publicly. And whatever would Mrs. Corelli think? Would she be dismissive like Marianne's parents? But Mrs. Corelli did not look surprised or disapproving. "I know Marianne is to have lessons," she said, "and I shall hear her sing this afternoon after our deportment lesson." But before deportment came half an hour of French conversation with Mrs. Neve. "Je ne comprends pas," whispered Sophia as they followed a group of older children into the front classroom, "our most useful phrase." "Here's another," said Lucy, pretending boredom. "Le français m'ennuie à mourir." They laughed, but Lucy, it turned out, was excellent at French, Mrs. Neve's best pupil. She could both speak and write the language well. Marianne's French was limited to what she had learned at her day school, and she struggled to keep up. She was relieved that Phoebe also seemed to be having trouble. Phoebe preferred their next lesson. The anxiety left her face as they returned to the dining room, where the central space had been cleared of furniture to make room for deportment and dancing with Mrs. Corelli. Mrs. Corelli was a large woman who moved with surprising lightness and grace. She was dressed dramatically in an emerald green gown that Marianne much admired. Marianne had thought learning how to stand up and sit down in a hoop skirt, how to curtsy, how to walk would be boring, but Mrs. Corelli made it fun. "Imagine, girls," she said, "that you are walking in the street wearing a hooped skirt. If you bounce along like this," she began walking in a jaunty way, and they giggled, "your skirt will set up a rhythm of its own, and you will not be able to control it, especially in a strong wind. And what if you sit down?" She flumped onto a chair so that her skirt stuck up at the front, revealing striped stockings. Marianne suspected she wore those just to make them laugh. They promenaded around the room, careful to hold themselves erect, and practiced sitting down and standing up and taking a man's arm, Mrs. Corelli acting the part of the man. "Lightly, child," she exclaimed when it was Marianne's turn. "Do not clutch." Marianne was embarrassed. It did not seem to her at all a comfortable way to walk, and she hoped no man would ever offer her his arm. She was relieved when they finished the lesson with a dance, a minuet. There was a harpsichord in the corner of the room, and Mrs. Corelli played, glancing up to watch them. The older girls took the man's part, and Marianne found herself dancing with a tall girl named Emma, whose limp hold made her own steps uncertain. She watched Phoebe, who looked as if she was born to dance. "Oh, I love the minuet," Phoebe exclaimed afterwards. "I can't wait to be old enough to go to balls." There was now a break from lessons, and the girls, who all looked pink and hot, fanned themselves as they queued for lemonade. Mrs. Corelli took 2 glasses and summoned Marianne. "We shall take these up to the music room, and I'll hear you sing." "Oh, now?" Marianne was alarmed. What would Mrs. Corelli think of her singing? And what would she ask her to sing? Perhaps something difficult. But when they reached the music room, Mrs. Corelli looked through a collection of songs and asked, "Now, what do you know? Nymphs and Shepherds on Greenland's coast?" "Oh, yes, both. Yes, I like Nymphs and Shepherds." "Good." She put the music on the stand and sat down at the harpsichord and began to play. Marianne came in on time, but tentatively. It was a while before she gained confidence and sang louder. She was enjoying herself, and as she continued, she almost forgot she was being tested. And when she reached the end, she saw that Mrs. Corelli was pleased. "You have a lovely natural voice," she said. "Soprano. I'm glad you are to have lessons. You will learn to control your breathing and to sing from here." She put a hand on her midriff. "You will have lessons with me once a week, and you will also join the choir, and I'm sure Mrs. Neve will want you to take part in our concert in September." "A concert?" "Every September, we invite parents and visitors to the school. There's a display of work, needlework, drawing, and such, and a concert with recitation, singing, and playing." "I should love to be in the concert," said Marianne, and she thought perhaps if I sing well, Mamma will believe that I could become an opera singer. She knew her father was less antagonistic to this idea than Mamma. He was a bit of a singer himself, and it was his mother, her grandmother Gifford, from whom Marianne had inherited her voice, and who had taken her to the opera for the first time and inspired in her the ambition to perform. She remembered how they had sat high up in the gallery and seen the singers far below on the candlelit stage, a jeweled tableau in a circle of light, and heard their voices soaring. Grandmamma Gifford had died last year, but Marianne remembered her with love and gratitude. "We will try Nymphs and Shepherds again," said Mrs. Crowley, "but first, let us talk about breathing." Marianne left after half an hour and joined the others, who were reading around the group, an improving text on the subject of modesty. Later, after supper, lagging a little behind the other three on their way to the dormitory, she had reached the first floor when she heard singing. Someone was singing Nymphs and Shepherds in an easy, absent-minded way, humming over forgotten words, and she had the feeling that whoever it was had heard her practicing with Mrs. Crowley and picked up the song by ear. The voice was a woman's, untrained, clear, and pleasant, like those of some of the ballad singers Marianne had loved to hear in the streets near her home. Who could it be? The sound did not come from the music room, but from a room next to the back stairs, a room Sophia hadn't bothered to mention. She did not dare open the door, and when she hurried to join the other three on the second floor, she was caught up in a flurry of gossip and giggles and forgot to ask them about it. Chapter 3. Jenny. Monday, May 28th, 1764. Dear Harriet, I can scarcely believe it is already a month since I came here to Chelsea. I told you in my last letter how very much I like the school, and I am still of the same mind. Mrs. Corelli is so kind as to say that she thinks well of my singing and that I am developing a stronger voice already. Mr. Ashton, who teaches the harpsichord, is also pleased with my efforts. He takes us for music and also mathematics. I am the best of friends with the three girls I share a room with. All four of us have harpsichord lessons, and Sophia and I are both in the choir. Sophia is full of gossip and plans. She is our leader. Phoebe is amiable and follows Sophia's view in everything. As for Lucy, Sophia teases her that she is so clever she will not get a husband. Lucy has a collection of shells and minerals which she keeps in a case under her bed, to the annoyance of the maids who try to sweep there. Although she is shy, she is witty and often makes us laugh. I've written to Mamma and expect she has told you that we read together in class every day and write essays, and Mrs. Neve also teaches us geography. There's a splendid globe like the one Papa bought for George, but larger. We do needlework, which I like less, but Phoebe produces exquisite work. Stitches so fine they can scarcely be seen. We also go out to take the air, and on these occasions we are expected to behave in a ladylike manner, only sometimes we are so excited that it is difficult not to exclaim or dart about. Last Saturday, on our half-holiday, a party of us went to the Chelsea Bun House, which sells the most delicious sugared buns and cakes. You would love it, Harriet. But Lucy was in even more delight over the collection of curios and antiques which forms a small museum within the shop. We saw some extraordinary objects there, among them cuttlefish bones and fossils and a stuffed lizard. On Sundays, we go in file to church. The church is nearby in Chelsea Walk and is ancient. It has been here since Chelsea's beginnings. Inside, we listen to very long sermons. They are exceedingly dull, but we behave ourselves well and are seen to advantage by our neighbors, and that pleases Mrs. Neve. Of course, we also sing hymns, which I enjoy. There's another person here who likes to sing, one of the maids. Her name is Jenny. I heard her singing Nymphs and Shepherds. Marianne paused and put down her pen. Perhaps it would be best not to write too much about Jenny. Harriet would undoubtedly share the letter with Mamma, and their mother might not like the idea of Marianne making a particular friend of one of the maids. She remembered her first evening when she had heard the singing, and how she had seen Jenny the next morning, coming out of the room on the first floor, her arms full of clean, folded bed linen. The open doorway behind her had revealed a storage room containing shelves and baskets and a linen press. Jenny was humming to herself, and Marianne had known at once that here was her singer from the night before. Without thinking, she exclaimed, "Oh, it was you!" The maid looked startled, and Marianne explained, "I heard you singing yesterday, Nymphs and Shepherds. I'd been practicing it with Mrs. Corelli." Jenny smiled. "I like to learn the young ladies' songs. They're different to the ballads I hear in the streets." "Do you come from Chelsea?" "Yes. My mother has a room on the waterfront by the ferry. There's a tavern near our house, the Half Moon. I sing there some nights, and at the Duke of York." Marianne was impressed. Jenny was a performer. She much admired the girl's looks, her dark eyes and tall, slender figure. She thought Jenny a finer looking girl than any of the young ladies at the school. She said shyly, "I should like to hear you." Jenny laughed. "Oh, I don't think so, miss. Not in a tavern." She shifted her bundle of linen and said, "I must see to my work or Mrs. Price will be after me." "The housekeeper?" "Yes." She knocked at one of the dormitory doors opposite and receiving no answer went in. It was a while before they spoke to one another again, but Jenny always acknowledged the younger girl with a smile, and Marianne felt that they had become friends. A week or two later, when the choir had been talking about Ranelagh Gardens, Marianne asked Jenny if she had ever been there. "Oh, yes, miss. Not as a visitor. That cost 2 and 6pence, and even more on fireworks night. But my cousin Nick plays the fiddle, and sometimes he'll go in and play for the crowds in the gardens. Last time he took me with him and I sang. We made a hatful of money before the stewards moved us on. You'd love the gardens, miss. All the great folk go there. And the lights, it's like paradise." Marianne brought her attention back to her letter. "I'll be home in less than a fortnight for Whitsun," she wrote, "and George too. We shall all have so much to tell each other. I am glad to bear your news from home, and to hear your news from home, and especially that Papa expects success from his new venture. If he is in good spirits when I come home, do you think he'll take us to the tower to see the animals? I do so love to go. Till then, dear Harriet, I remain your devoted sister, Marianne Gifford." All right. I will see you next time if you've subscribed for Chapter 4 of Chelsea Walks.